going on tonight?
So just to kind of recap, our officers initially responded to a neighborhood dispute involving the subject involved in this incident. When they arrived on scene, the subject pointed a gun at our officers, and there was an initial officer-involved shooting at that point. The subject then ran inside the house, barricaded himself, and at some point came into the backyard where our containment units encountered him. That subject then pointed the gun at our officers, fired a shot, and our officers were forced to return fire. The suspect is now down. We're rendering medical aid, and I don't have the current status on his condition, but obviously feel extremely fortunate that none of our officers were injured in this altercation, and that's the information I have currently.
In the first OIS, did the subject fire any shots at officers, or was it just officers firing at the subject?
So we're still early in our investigation. We know that the subject or suspect did point the firearm at the officers during this initial encounter. It's unknown whether or not he fired at the officers at that time.
Do you have any kind of age on the suspect?
I don't. I know he's a white male adult, but I don't know his age.
Neighbors were telling me that you guys were here this morning because he was running around naked in his front yard and that he is known to you for mental illness. Can you corroborate that?
Yeah, I don't know exactly the history at this location. I know that we were called here this afternoon for a neighborhood dispute, obviously rising to the level that the neighbors were in some sort of fear, calling for the police to come assist.
Can you talk more about that dispute? What was going on? What happened that had neighbors call you guys?
Yeah, I don't know the particulars on the dispute, but I know obviously that it was enough that the neighbors were fearful that they called the police, and when we arrived on scene shortly thereafter, making contact with the suspect, he pointed that firearm at us, and that's when that initial officer-involved shooting occurred.
So when did this all start from the first call and the police officers?
I don't know the exact time, but I believe it was about 3:30 p.m. this afternoon is when the officers encountered him, and he pointed the firearm at them.
Is he known to your department? I mean, have you been here before?
Yeah, good question. That was kind of what was asked. I don't know exactly what his history is with our department at this time. That's obviously all part of the investigation, but I don't know his history.
Do you know if he was taken to the hospital or if he's being treated here?
The last I heard, he was initially being treated on scene immediately following the officer-involved shooting. I don't know his status currently, and I'm not sure if he's been transported or not.
Do you know when? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Are there multiple scenes right now?
Yes, there is. Initially, I would say our first scene, obviously, in front of the house where the initial, where he pointed the firearm at our officers, and there was an initial officer-involved shooting. And then we have a second incident that occurred to the rear of the house, where he pointed the firearm at our officers and actually fired upon them, and at which point they returned fire.
Do you know about what the time frame was between that? Was this a matter of minutes or a couple of hours?
I don't want to speculate, but my best estimate is probably about 2 hours or so between those two incidents.
I
So
saw a
between
tech
those
team
2
go
hours, he was
into the house.
barricaded?
Did they clear it?
I'm sorry.
I saw a tech team go into the house right after the shooting. Did they clear the house? Was there anybody else in there?
So the information we had initially was there was no one else in the house, and absolutely after the suspect was taken into custody and we started rendering medical aid, we definitely would have cleared the house just to make sure that everything was safe and there was nobody else outstanding inside.
Lieutenant, between those 2 hours, the man was barricaded inside. Were officers trying to get him to come out, or what was the situation at that point during that 2 hour period?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we had hostage negotiations folks that were trying to make contact with him repeatedly during the entirety of this incident to try to bring a peaceful resolution, obviously. He did enter into the backyard several times while our officers were trying to make contact with him, but each time he was, I don't know exactly what was said, but he was expressing some disappreciation, if that's the right word, for the officers that were behind the house, and he would kind of come inside the house and back outside, and then at one point he came back outside with the firearm pointed at our officers and actually shot at them, and luckily none of them were struck, but officers returned fire and the suspect was down in the back of the house.
So officers spent time trying to get him to come out peacefully.
Absolutely. Our hostage negotiations, our crisis negotiations team was on the phone with him a number of times trying to bring a peaceful resolution to this.
But it is his residence?
The information I have is that it's his residence. I believe he lives there with, I believe, his wife, but no one else was inside the house during the entirety of this incident, to my knowledge.
And how many officers were involved in the return fire?
As far as actually involved in the shooting, my understanding is only one officer exchanged gunfire with the suspect.
And is that the first OIS or the second OIS?
That's the second.
he ran into his own.
That's what my understanding. Yes.
In the original one, it was just a patrol power to come check out the disturbance, just one unit here when the first shooting happened.
I don't know exactly how many units arrived initially, but obviously they were responding to some sort of odd behavior, and that's when they encountered the suspect, and he pointed the firearm at them the first time.
Do you know if there's how many guns he had in the house?
I don't know that at this time.
What kind of gun did he have?
I believe it was a handgun, but I don't have any of the particulars.
It seems a little bizarre for something this serious to be happening in broad daylight. Can you speak on maybe how bizarre this is for Citrus Heights?
Yeah, this is definitely an isolated incident. I can tell you that this is generally a very, very safe neighborhood and a very safe part of Citrus Heights. Obviously odd to have this occur, but what I can tell you is it is isolated. It was involving this one subject, and obviously we want the neighbors to feel this scene is locked down. It's involving this one person, and this is a safe neighborhood, and people should feel such.